Welcome back, everybody, to one of our quarter roundups. This is where a bunch of us YouTubers, individuals within the prog sphere, talk about those albums that have been released and talk about our favorite ones, our least favorite ones, and those albums that surprised us. And then we'll finish off the conversation with those albums we're really excited for in the next quarter. So the albums we'll be talking about today are those that have been released between April, May, and June. So the second quarter of this year. And yeah, let's go around. We have a little bit of a smaller group today, but that's all right. I'm sure we'll have a lot of really good discussions anyway. But yeah, you all know me. This is my channel. So if you don't know who I am, watch any of my videos that are on my channel. Let's go around and start just for how my screen is counterclockwise, and we'll start with Brent.
Oh, hey everybody, Brent from the Similitude of Prog. Always looking forward to these quarterly videos, as I hope everybody else is, and let's have a good show.
Excellent. And below Brent, we've got Travis.
Hi, I'm Travis, also known as Low Show. I occasionally post videos on YouTube. I used to write album reviews for ultimateguitar.com. I also have my own progressive instrumental project called Borealia. We're on Spotify, YouTube, you name it.
Amazing. And we'll finish off this quartet with Nathan.
All right, I'm Nathan. I have a channel called Nathan on Shuffle, which covers all kinds of prog topics, and I have a weekly news-related show talking about the top prog headlines. I do weekly album reviews, essentially, and I do reaction episodes with my wife where I'm showing her prog music. So just always trying to keep my finger on the pulse of the prog scene, and these videos help me with that as I hear a bunch of cool recommendations. So excited.
Amazing. Yeah, this is all, I mean, regardless of how many people actually watch this, I do this just for myself to see what have I missed, what albums do I need to check out, what albums can I avoid. This is why I do it. So we'll start off with the album that we have enjoyed the most this quarter. I've got because there's four of us, I've got a four-sided dice. So I'm actually included in this one. Most of the time I remove myself so I can go last, but we'll see where we are. And that seems like it's going to be Brent going up first with your favorite album of this year, or not this year, this quarter.
My favorite album of this quarter has been this.
Ah, yes.
Approbation by Archrust, I think is how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really surprised. I think it's the first masterpiece of this year. In fact, I will go on record as saying that. I really enjoyed it. It was something I needed to hear. It, has a little bit of the growl vocals, which I don't appreciate, but it's used so little that it's okay. And musically, I think it's perfection.
Amazing.
I don't think there's a bad track on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a lot of really good things about this album, and I've been enjoying it myself. Ian, unfortunately couldn't make it today, the owner of Rhyme Signatures, said that this is what that collaboration between Michael Eckefelt from Opeth and Steven Wilson from Porcupine Tree, when they put out Storm Corrosion, this is what it should have sounded like. And I agree, like, this is kind of what I think everybody was hoping for. I still love Storm Corrosion. I love that album so much. But yeah, it's the perfect intersection between those two bands, and really the synthesis of what prog was like the turn of the last decade. So like from 2009 to about 2011, it distills that timepiece of prog music so perfectly.
Yeah, I love this one too. It's kind of circling around my top picks also, and love it for a lot of the same reasons. Just that perfect marriage of that like Opeth style and Porcupine Tree style, and like that classic era of some of those Opeth albums, like Watershed and that era, plus the Porcupine Tree like Dead Wing era. So it's really cool. Every track is great. There's some extended tracks and great instrumental moments, and yeah, just a really cool, especially for a debut record, that they're able to do something this strong right out of the gate is pretty cool and shows great promise for hopefully a future for them.
You know, and I can see that you enjoyed it because you got it right there, right?
Yeah, it's one I gotta have. It's up here.
Yeah. Sorry, Trav, I cut you off.
That's all good. Controversially, I still have yet to hear this album.
This is right up your lane, man. This is like this
Yeah,
is made for you.
Describing like Opeth and Porcupine Tree 2008 2011 prog metal, that's my jam. So I better get on that record because y'all are hyping it up for me here.
Yeah. So that was, and my brain wants to pronounce it as Archivist, but I think it's Arkrust.
Yeah.
So that's Arkrust's approbation.
Remember when I first saw it and nobody knew how to pronounce the name? I was like, am I going to have to remove my tongue to pronounce that?
Just so many bands turn their U's into V's, like Dune did that. And for the longest time, I thought it was Divine. It's like, no, it's just Dune.
Well, I mean, at least it's better than putting umlauts over all the letters.
That's true. Trav, let's go to you. We're going to go counterclockwise from what I'm looking at.
All right. Well, I think the record that really impacted me the most this quarter comes from quite possibly one of the most iconic thrash metal bands ever to have existed. And I'm, of course, talking about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Had you there. With Petrodragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night and Annihilation of Planet Earth and the Beginning of Merciless Damnation.
Yeah. It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. That's a title. And I really enjoyed the record. I did like Infest the Rat's Nest. I thought that was a really good, like, kind of them dipping their toes into this whole thrash metal thing, but I did find that Infest was a little bit too, like, one note for me. It was just, let's get the pedal to the metal with the thrash riffs, and they didn't really do much of anything else with it. Whereas I find Petrodragonic, they've kind of melded in some of their more melodic and more, progressive tendencies in with it. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a full-on progressive metal record, but it's about as close as I think we're ever going to get to King Gizzard doing prog metal. And I mean, I can't single out a track. Every time I listen to it, it's got to go the whole way through. But there's just some really good passages of music in here. It just pumps me up,
Yeah, somebody had mentioned, and I can't remember who, but it was another reviewer said that this is when King Giz put out Infest the Rat's Nest, they were tourists of the thrash metal, and this is them staking a claim actually in the thrash metal and starting to bleed into their progressive metal tendencies. I've loved this record. We got, I think, 2 or 3 tracks that are into the 10-minute mark. So like some really good prog in that sense as well. So yeah, with that album down, we can expect like 3 or 4 more albums from this band this year.
They've probably put one out in like the last 10 minutes that we've been chatting here. So
probably. Yeah, absolutely.
I should also point out, like, as a guitar player, I was really impressed with the guitar work on this record. Like, King Gizzard isn't really known for like shred guitar solos, but they pepper them all over this record, and like I just get a big smile on my face every time. I think it's usually Stu who plays them. Every time Stu goes into full shred mode, I'm just like, yeah.
That's great. So yeah, Nathan and Brent, have you heard this record?
I have not heard it. No.
I think you might enjoy this. Yeah, knowing you like the Iron Maidens and a lot of the thrashy or proggier stuff from the 80s. Yeah. This really fits within that wheelhouse.
I should check it out.
Yeah, I listened through it. It's not really my cup of tea, really. I don't really like
That's
the
fair.
thrash metal sound, but it's maybe one I need to like give another go through, just trying to pick up on those like prog metal tendencies, because I do like some of that. So, but it was a little bit disappointing to me as I'm trying to get into the band, but I think that's more my taste because everyone else loves it. So
Hey, that's fair. When Infest the Rat's Nest came out, I was just like, this is not for me. And even now, I'm like, I don't return to it as much as their other stuff. But yeah, I like it more than some of their other heavier records. So
yeah.
cool. Yeah, and that was King Gizzard. I always called it Pedro Draconic, but it's Petro Dracon. Anyway, it's that record from King Giz that came out this quarter.
It's the one with the long title. It's gonna be like that Coheed and Cambria record where it's like you never refer to it by its name. It's just the one with the 4 on the cover.
Yeah, it's 4 part 1, or yes, yeah, 4 part 1, which is their third album. Let's go to Nathan. Nathan, what was your favorite record?
Okay, so yeah, I've been like listening to a lot of these records over the past week, trying to figure out which one should rise to the top. And the one that I like the most is No Spoon and their album Opus. So we talked about Akrust, who's like a 2010s makes of Porcupine Tree and Opeth. This is like a 2010s makes of Haken and Dream Theater. Really great debut album once again, similar to that one. But I just, even though there's a lot in common with like that early Haken period, like especially Visions, it sounds a lot like that. I do think they're adding in their own voice in certain sections and certain parts that just add a little bit more to it. But it's just the sound that I really enjoy, and it's a concept record, and it's just really fun and exciting. There's so many amazing instrumental moments where they go into these different types of sections, different time signatures, and different genre hopping and all that kind of stuff. Like those brief moments of like circus music type thing that like Haken likes to do, and like jazzier moments. And I think their vocalist is fantastic. So many great vocal moments and hooks and melodies. It's really spoken to me over the past week as I've re-listened to it over and over. And I think this is a band that has a lot of promise also, that they can really do a lot of great things in the future. I think if this is their first statement and it's this great right off the bat, it sounds really great production wise also, and it's just really strong, and I'm really impressed with it. So that was my pick for the quarter.
Yeah, I've been loving that record. I think of all the like prog metal acts that came out this year, I always found one of my biggest criticisms of it was that they lean too heavily on their influences rather than saying their own thing. And even though this one fits the bill for that very, very well, I love the influences that they're playing with so much that I could give it a pass. Like, I think it was somebody in this little chat, and it might have been you, Nathan, that was like, this is what would have happened if Haken's Vision and Dream Theater's Black Clouds and Silver Linings like intersected.
Right, yeah.
Because there are moments on here that's like, yeah, that's A Nightmare to Remember, or that's the Count of Tuscany, or that's the title track from Visions. And I love both of those records so much that hearing what they're doing with presented in a little bit of a different way was enough for me to be like, oh yes, I'm just going to eat that all up because it's so good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
another
it's a
one I
great
haven't
record.
heard, and y'all are hyping it up for me. Like I love Haken, I love Dream Theater.
I was going to say, this is another one that's been made for you.
I got
Yeah.
how have I been sleeping on all these records this quarter?
It's because there's been like an armful length of things to choose from. I found that a little bit frustrating actually, because
yeah,
where do I go? You guys are all, I don't know, mental. You so much reviewing. I'm like, oh, I can't compete. But,
I know.
this sounds like something that I would enjoy too, isn't it? As
Yeah.
Travis says.
Yeah, I was lucky enough that I went on vacation at the end of June, so I just spent that entire time listening and catching up to most of these. That's how I was able to listen to Arkrust and No Spoon, and the other one that fits very much in this is Anchoret's album as well.
Yeah.
which we might be talking about little later on. We'll see. Like all three of these are very similar, but the only way I was going to be able to listen to them is, listening to them when I had time on vacation.
Yeah.
So
I just wish it had a physical release is all. They need to come out with a CD or vinyl or something, but right now it's just streaming only, I think. But well worth checking out. No Spoon's Opus, really good.
Yeah, and like just like Our Crust, like this is their debut album, and so like if this is where they're starting at, I can't wait to see where they go.
Exactly.
So yeah, No Spoon Opus. So you guys didn't make my life any easier because you didn't pick any of the ones that I have. So now I need to kind of figure out what one I want to do. I've been able to narrow it down to 3 because Brent, I have the exact same frustration. It's like so much was released within this quarter. I have a feeling we might have a little bit of a drought within the next quarter, like within July, August, and September. But
yeah, we usually tend to.
Yeah, so maybe this will allow us to take a little bit of a breather. But I think the way that I'm going to do this is the album that I've listened to the most, because this is the one that I've come back to time and time and time again. And I think once we're done this, we'll just quickly go around the table and just say the other best albums that we've been listening to, just to give a little bit of a spotlight on those guys if we want. But yeah, this is the record that I've continuously come back to, always enjoyed it. I bought the CD to listen to in the car because sometimes when I'm driving through the countryside, my internet won't connect properly onto Spotify. So this is an album that I think is quite controversial. A lot of people didn't like it, but I loved it. This is one of those, it was made for me, which means nobody else was going to like it. This was the newest album from Prog, Metal Legends of Avenged Sevenfold. And we're talking about Life is But a Dream. This is the album that, again, I almost had it as my most surprising album, but then the more I listened to it, the more I realized, this is the best album. As I mentioned, a lot of people didn't like it. They thought it was too weird, too kooky, too all over the place. It was a complete mess. And when I'm hearing a lot of these criticisms, I'm like, you guys wouldn't have lasted 10 seconds listening to any of the prog music that came out from the 70s. If you think that this is a mess, like if you were to sit down and listen to The Power and the Glory from Gentle Giant, you would have wanted to jump out of a window because like there's a rhyme and a reason to the incongruousness of a lot of the tracks on here. Most of the tracks don't follow the typical structure of a regular album or a track. It's not A, B, A, C, A, B. And that's kind of what makes prog so interesting. And that's what made this album so interesting. The single of Nobody it hooked me immediately. I know a lot of people are like, ugh, what is this? I'm like, this is amazing. I'm loving the sounds that the band is playing with. They didn't use a lot of pre-recorded stuff. They used a lot of production, but it wasn't like sampling. It wasn't just putting production on for production's sake. They were, trying to use the guitars as a synthesizer. They were trying to use the synthesizer as a guitar. There's a bunch of moments on here where I'm like, that is a legit mellotron. The finish off my little soapbox praise of this album. Cosmic is the mid track on this, and it's a perfect song. I weep whenever I listen to it. It's the best song of 2023 so far. And yeah, I understand where the criticisms are coming from, and I understand that's just a difference of taste, but this whetted my appetite and my taste for this album so perfectly. So yeah, that was Life is But a Dream from Avenged Sevenfold, which I am shocked that this is my favorite record of theirs. And my favorite record so far of this year, because I know them as the quirky side project that Mike Portnoy joined because their drummer passed away, and Mike Portnoy's like, hey, y'all are looking for a drummer? I'll sneak into your DMs and I'll help you out. They're the weird ones that did Backcountry and A Little Piece of Heaven. So yeah, anyway, that's my record. What'd you all think about this record?
I didn't have notes, listing an Avenged Sevenfold as their favorite so far of the year on my 2023 bingo card.
Mhm.
That wasn't something I factored into this year, but
I
no,
didn't either.
I'm pretty much with you on that. Like that
Mhm.
record is wacky. It's just
Mhm.
so wild. I never thought I would hear like a tune from Avenged Sevenfold that made me go, somebody's been listening to Zappa.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very different. I think I may be a little more critical of it than you are. There's a couple tracks that I'm like, not so hot on. I will agree that Cosmic is one of the better tracks that I've heard so far this year. I'm gonna say it's at least one of the like top 2 guitar solos that anybody's put to tape. The other one being Rise from the new Extreme record. That's a great solo. But Cosmic, that solo at the end, mwah, perfection. Yeah, it's an absolutely wild record. And I think anybody who's kind of like, oh, Avenged Sevenfold, they're just some crappy metalcore band that, you know, the goth kids in my high school used to listen to.
Yeah.
Check this record out. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I was surprised by it. Not my usual cup of tea, I'd say, but I did check out Nightmare back when it came out just because of Mike Portnoy's involvement.
Same.
And I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, just the diversity and just all the different things that they're doing, just so many different styles thrown into it. I found it really fun to listen to.
And maybe go back and check out their previous record, The Stage, while you're at it, because a lot of what they were doing with Life Is But a Dream, they kind of kicked that off on the stage, like where they started really pushing the progressive boundaries with that record. It's still very much steeped in their kind of metalcore past, but I think if you listen to The Stage and then listen to Life Is But a Dream, you're like, I get it now. I get where this is coming from.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Nathan, I don't know anything else from them except Nightmare. So I kind of wrote them off as, like you said. So maybe I should, on your recommendation, have a listen.
Yeah. It's kooky. It's quirky.
Okay.
So before we get into those albums that disappointed us, were there any other albums this quarter that really surprised y'all? Well, I guess shouldn't say because that's going to be the second one, but that you would consider like the best, like the ones that you really, really loved. Oh, the new mystery one. Yes.
Yeah.
I had that on my list too.
Lies and Butterflies was a good album, but I found it lacked a little bit of energy. And I hoped to release something new. It would have a little bit of a kick to it. And they do that on this.
Yeah.
I recommend this highly too. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. It's really good.
Yeah. What was the title of that one again?
Redemption.
Redemption. Thank you. Yeah, that's right.
Ari and Lucas and Supersonic Revolution, Golden Age of Music. It's
fun.
a little one note compared to, Arian's usual fare, but it's just like if you want some just like good kicking classic hard rock, go for it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really like the new Yes album, Mirror to the Sky. I thought it was really strong for them. I mean, it's still a newer era Yes album, so it's not going to be like a classic 70s record, but it's one of the best of the last few that they've put out, I thought, and had a lot more energy, and especially the title track I thought was really well put together and some great orchestration in there, and so I thought that was pretty strong. I really liked Lars Fredrik Frosli as well. The keyboardist of Wobbler put out his solo record that was really cool. Just classic symphonic prog that 4 really good extended pieces on there, and that was a fantastic one.
Yeah, absolutely. The only 2 that I have, Fires in the Distance, some really good metal. They put out an album, Air Not Meant for Us. And I think the thing that put this above the usual hard metal scene that I love is the amount of classical piano that can be found on here. That really elevated this beyond just the typical black metal that I've been listening to. And speaking of black metal, because I've been listening to a lot of that. Unfortunately, I didn't hear Liturgy's record until after, because that would have made my my first quarter of 93696. But if you're looking for something similar to that and want something a little bit more, a little bit chunky, Victory Over the Sun put out a brilliant album called Dance You Monsters to My Soft Song. It starts off with a 16-minute epic, and it is just, it's insane. I love how aggressive it is. I love how intense it is. But ultimately, I also just love how soft and like symphonic it is. Like typically black metal doesn't have that symphonic edge, but this one has a number of moments that I'm like, wow, it's like a chorus of angels on this track. This is intense. So yeah, I would recommend checking out those two, Fires in the Distance and Victory Over the Sun. Both are fantastic. All right, let's move on to those albums that disappointed us. I like disappointed rather than the worst, because I find I bring expectations to albums that I try not to bring, and ultimately they don't get met, or it's just the hype that's around an album that doesn't quite live up to the expectations. So I'm going to roll the dice to find out who's going to go first. No, that was who was last time. That was also who was last time. Give me something other than that one. There we go. Okay. Let's start with Nathan this time.
Okay. Yeah, this is always a toughie. I circled around a couple options. There's a couple that just aren't really my thing, so I didn't feel it was fair to say, like King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. Like, I know it's a good record just because everyone's talked about it so highly, but it's just not for me. But I was thinking about talking about Jethro Tull's latest record, Rock Flute, which it's fine, but I just didn't grab me. Similar to last year's record, Zealot Gene. Just listened through it once or twice, thought it was pretty cool, but then just lost interest after a while. Just didn't really go back to it, and I don't know. It's not as grabbing me as some of the earlier works, and for some reason it's just not working as much for me. His voice is kind of tough for me to listen to now, he's because of age and different things, but there's some interesting instrumental moments peppered throughout, but overall it just was a little bit disappointing to me compared to some of the other prog stuff, which I thought Yes came back with a pretty good one. So for legacy prog bands, I thought this was kind of the lesser of those.
Yeah, it's interesting. I ended up liking this a lot more than I thought I was going to, especially after the Zealot Gene that came out last year that I was less than excited for. I think I listened to that once after I did my review. And so I kind of came with that energy into Rock Flute, and I ended up liking that one a lot more because it was a little bit more like song focused, rather than concept focus, and then the concept bloom out of it. Yeah, still streets away from, the 70s classic stuff, but I think it's just as good as some of the better records that we got from like the 80s and 90s, like Crest of a Knave and Beastie.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Yeah.
But yeah, it's with a lot of these legacy prog bands, it's like they're past their prime and they're just kind of doing whatever they want to, and it's fine. It's fine, but yeah. I totally understand the disappointment. It's just like, this was one of the best bands that put out some of the best records. What are you guys doing now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's go on to, I guess I'll go because I like to.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there.
Oh, go for it, Trav. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'd only heard the singles from Rock Flute so far, but I noted that there was a little bit more of like a guitar focus on at least the singles. I don't know about the rest of the album, but it kind of has had me a little intrigued to maybe check out the rest of the record, but it just hasn't been on my to-do list. So
yeah, I don't
but
want to
I
say
do remember liking what I heard for the singles.
Yeah, I don't want to say you're not missing anything by not checking it out, because I think out of a lot of the stuff that we've heard from Jethro Tull and even from Ian Anderson, this is probably in the better stuff that he's released post 2000. But that's still not saying a whole lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, later era legacy band stuff, it can't all be good. So,
Yeah.
take it for what it is.
Yeah. So I'll go next, since that's the order that I think we'll be keeping in. Much like as Nathan was saying, like this album was one that I think I brought a little too much expectation to. This is from a band that got my favorite record of the year that their debut album came out, and this is the follow-up. And I don't want to subscribe to the sophomore slump, but I feel that's pretty adequate to say for this one. And the original album that came out from them, I grew to love, and I was hoping that the same would happen with this one, but the more I listened to it, the less interested I got. So this is the album from Zio, with their album True Waves. Flower Torrentia, I believe, is their first record. It blew me away. It was, as I mentioned, my favorite album of 2020. I love their fusing of a bunch of different prog elements, like symphonic prog, retro prog, metal prog. And it felt fresh. It felt new. It didn't feel like it was a clone band or leaning on any one influence. But this just felt like a watered down version of that. There's a few passages, I think, I could be wrong, but I want to say John Mitchell is on one of the tracks on here. And there's a couple other prog superstars that make an appearance, but it just doesn't feel like, it doesn't have that same magic that I was looking for. It's still a fine record, but with the amount of fun that I had with their first record, this one just felt lackluster. It felt like they didn't quite know what to do for their second record. So yeah, Zio's True Waves was a little bit of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I checked this one out, and yeah, I listened to it a few times, but it didn't really ever grow on me as much as I hoped it would, even though it has a pretty strong group of guests. I think Eric Gillette is on it from Neil Morse Band, and
Yeah.
John Mitchell, like you said. So I was expecting good things, and it was fine, but not great.
Yeah, and that's why I like these disappointments, because like I can't say it's a bad record, it's a fine record. But when I'm expecting, the follow-up from one of my favorite records of a year from 2 years ago, I was hoping for something more than just a fine record. Yeah, Brent and Trav, did you guys check this one out?
Actually, I haven't heard of it.
You're not missing much.
No.
Unfortunately. I would recommend checking out their first record, though. Yeah, I always mispronounce the second one, but second word, it's like Flower Tutoriala or something like that. Let me just bring that up. It's so hard to find too. Flower. No, not finding it. That's fine. Okay. Let's go on to Brent. Brent, what was your disappointment of the second quarter?
Well, I'll say I really liked the Zealot Gene, and Rock Float was very disappointing to me. I just lack of energy, way too much flute. I don't mind the flute, but it's got to be the most censored instrument on the whole album.
That's a criticism I've never heard of Jethro Tull before.
Too much flute.
Not more cowbell, more flute. And being such a big fan of all their material, it's probably mid-tier. It could have done better, but there is worse out there.
Yeah.
It's an honest effort. I don't recommend people necessarily buying it, but do listen to it. It's worthy of that.
Yeah. I do enjoy it. Oh, go for it.
No, I was just saying, for sure it's good to listen to.
Yeah, something that I didn't mention when Nathan was talking about it. I enjoy the concept and how the concept plays with some of the tracks, all about like the Norse mythology and the Norse religion, and kind of the pre-Christian judo religion as well. What religion looked like before we had this big swell of what we currently have. I mean, it's something that Jethro Tull has played with a lot. So this kind of felt like a logical conclusion for that.
Right.
But like I said, it's a fine record.
But props to them and any other legacy band that's still putting out music. They're obviously doing it for themselves, and I think that in itself is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if they don't want to tour anymore, keep making albums. Then that would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Let's go to Trav. Trav, what was your most disappointing record of this quarter?
That was a really tough one to figure out because there haven't really been any new releases I've listened to where I've like gone, oh, this is terrible. How could I have listened to something so bad? Like every release I've listened to so far has been pretty good. The one that I would say though, like that did kind of disappoint me the most. I actually kind of have to throw y'all under the bus a little bit on this one because it was recommended to me in our group chat.
Let's do it.
It was the instrumental album from Hackberry, Breathing Space.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big instrumental prog guy, instrumental metal. That's literally the genre of music I make. And I don't know, there was something about this Hackberry record, I couldn't finish it. Like I just I liked the ideas behind it. I think what it is there didn't really seem to be much structure to it. It's like kind of like riff A, riff B, riff C, riff D. And I felt like the tracks just never really went anywhere. Like I'm a big believer in the idea of when you're writing an instrumental piece, even if it's metal or prog, it should still come off like a song. Trey Xavier of formerly of Gear Gods on YouTube has a songwriting contest going on, and a lot of the entries sound like the stuff in this Hackberry, and he calls them riff salads because it's basically what it is. It's just like, here's a riff, here's another riff, here's another riff, not really with like a top line melody over it, or like if there is, it's just like a solo, and then it just kind of goes off into more riff salad territory. I will say though, like I did enjoy a lot of the concepts, like a lot of the ideas that they were doing. I could see where, you know, they were pulling from some of my influences as well. Like I could hear like the Porcupine Tree and Opeth and even a little bit of like Dream Theater kind of mixed in, but I don't know, it wasn't for me. And although oddly enough, I will say this, it reminds me of something my drummer friend and I used to do a lot when we were younger. We would get together in his basement. I'd just plug my guitar into an amp and he would just wail on the drums for like 10 minutes. And I'd just randomly riff over his drumming and we'd record it. And then we'd come back to the recording after we were done and be like, all right, this riff is really cool. Can we build a song out of it? And the Hackberry record kind of reminds me of those recordings of like, it's just like a bunch of random riffing over, you know, somebody wailing on the drums. Like it feels unfinished to me. I think there's a lot of potential, and I really hope that Hackberry kind of plays on some of that potential for their next release, because I'm sure there's something here that I'm really going to enjoy. Just not this record. This one wasn't for me.
Oh, that's fair. I ended up really enjoying it, but I could see, and this is something I have qualm with a lot of instrumental prog, is like I need perch. I need something to grab my talons into,
like
where
a
the song
good catchy hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that roots the song in there, whether it's a melody, whether it's like a root of some kind. But yeah, I still ended up enjoying it, but I can understand and totally see where the disappointment would be for that. Yeah, Brent, Nathan, have you guys had to listen to Hackberry?
Never heard of it.
Oh no.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun.
I've listened to it. I enjoy it quite a bit. I'm not as much into like instrumental prog or instrumental prog metal, I want to get more into it. So this was a cool one to check out. I like Liquidation Experiment and that kind of stuff, but I could see the criticisms that there's a lot of riffs, a lot of sections that don't have much catchy hooks or things to grab you. I definitely understand that. It's more just like a general, like, this is cool prog metal stuff, but nothing really to like stand out and to really point to is like, oh, that was a cool part there. But generally I liked listening to it. I thought it was evocative of some of that cool 2000s prog metal stuff that we've been talking about. So really good stuff.
Which one of you was responsible for mentioning it in the group chat? I think it was Ian.
Yeah, I think Ian brought it up at first.
I'm gonna throw the one that's not here under the bus.
Yeah,
so
he's the one who recommended all the bad stuff. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Question: I know you find that kind of music tiring to listen to?
Yeah,
Because it's so much all over the place, and it's like,
yeah, a little bit.
I find with it.
Yeah, it was. I have to be in the right headspace for it. Otherwise, like, I find putting that kind of stuff on in the background is okay. Like if I'm doing house chores or reading or playing a video game. But I have to be, like I said, I have to be in the right headspace for it.
My trick to it, like for me, because like I said, that's the kind of music I make, is to treat it like I'm writing a song with vocals, and then just instead of having the vocal melody have words, it's played on a guitar. I also try to keep my own songs relatively short and sweet. Like, I know there's a lot of instrumental metal bands that are like, let's make this like a 12-minute epic. And if you can't get your instrumental words out in like 4 or 5 minutes, maybe you're overplaying a bit. You're overstaying your welcome. Like, when you have just instrumentals, you can do a lot in a smaller space when you don't have to worry about being behind a singer.
Yeah, Stream of Consciousness from Dream Theater. Come on, you have no. I'm just playing. I freaking love that song. I mean, but that's another reason why Dream Theater's most of their instrumental tracks usually end around the 5 or 6 minute mark, and they only have one that goes on to 12 minutes. But yeah, absolutely. Were there any other disappointments around the table? I have one that I can start us off with that I was so excited for this record. And what I got was a big nothing sandwich. And that is the new Sigur Rós album of Atta. And this is like their first actual studio recording and not just one of their like meditative things or like very soundscapey things like this. They're marketing it as a actual studio record of theirs. And it just sounded like another one of their meditative records without the emotional core that those records have. And I'm a huge fan of Sigur Rós. They were one of my favorite bands from the 90s and the 2000s. The albums of, like, I always want to say, because I can never pronounce half of them. Parentheses is one that I love. I always just call it the Fetus Angel because I can never pronounce. However, the blue one. Everybody knows the blue album.
Agatis or something.
Yeah, and then Talk is the only one that I can actually get out. Those 3 records are masterpieces. They're so good, and all the albums that they put out since then have been fine. They've been good, but Atta was just a big old nothing sandwich. I was really disappointed for that one. Yeah, because I love Sigur Rós, and some of those meditative albums that they put out within the past 10 years are really good. If you're into more soundscapey stuff like a Devin Townsend Snuggles. But if you're not into that and it's just like, get me out of here. It's practically elevator music at that point. But yeah, that was the only other big disappointment that I had of this quarter.
I think I heard them at the doctor's office.
Yeah, right next to all the National Geographics and Reader's Digest magazines. Yeah, pretty much.
Something is past its due date when you hear it in the waiting room or at a grocery store.
Yeah. Oh, I was. This is a complete aside, but I remember being at the grocery store and "Killing in the Name of" from Rage Against the Machine was playing, and I'm like, "This, am I that old?" Like,
I can one up you on that one. At our local grocery store, "Yours Is No Disgrace" by Yes played
Wow.
once
okay, that's really cool though. That's
years
really
ago.
cool. Yeah, that's really
Uh,
cool.
I have a couple of other, I guess now that I'm looking at like my list, I have a couple other mild disappointments. The Ocean's Holocene. I know a lot of people are really enjoying it. I don't know. It just kind of bored me a bit compared to some of their past stuff. Um, I said I was going to mention this album later on, and I don't want to say that it's like a big disappointment because I've actually really been enjoying it. But Metallica's 72 Seasons, once again, like as a guitar player, I have to sort of uh yeah, the guitar solos on it just aren't great. I say this with absolutely no hyperbole, no braggadocious claim here. I could have done the solos better myself.
You're not the only one saying that. I don't know if Kirk Hammett's running out of ideas or what, but I've heard that from lots of people.
Yeah.
I think Kirk is just losing steam with the band. Like if you go listen to his Portals EP from last year, there's some brilliant guitar playing, excellent musical ideas on that, and he's just not bringing it to Metallica anymore.
That's fair. Yeah. Any other disappointments from around the table?
I was thinking to mention, once again, more maybe just not to my taste, but Sleep Token, their album "Take Me Back to Eden." Like, I was interested because of the buzz, and it's like different genres and all molded together. I'm like, this could be really cool, and I like certain tracks and certain moments, but just overall, it's kind of long to get through, and some of especially the later half tracks, they all kind of blend together, and they don't really stand out to me so much. So that was one.
Yeah.
I thought.
And
Sorry.
just before, I did not enjoy the Sleep Token. Like, there are moments on there that I'm like, this is fun. But a lot of the criticisms that people were slugging at Avenged Sevenfold's "Life Is But a Dream" was what I was feeling on Sleep Token, and what everybody was praising Sleep Token for was what I felt for Avenged Sevenfold. So I'm like, what's going?
Yeah.
Am I living in a bizarro world where these two albums have been switched? Like, what's going on here?
My take on the Sleep Token thing is it kind of reminds me of a couple of years ago when Spirit Box was like being hailed as the future of metal. And when I first listened to it, I'm like, this is literally just Gent from 10 years ago. And I feel the same way about Sleep Token. It's like everybody's like hyping it like this is what the future of progressive metal looks like. And this is just like the sort of synthy, poppy Gent of 5 years ago. I've heard this before.
Yeah, I personally love not Sleep Token, sorry, Spirit Box. I love what they were doing and what they continue to do.
I didn't say they were bad. It just
yeah,
I've heard
getting
it before.
those, and that's like Sleep Token is just like, oh, so they're infusing a lot of the pop stuff that we had from the 2010s. Like, this doesn't sound like new metal. This just sounds like old rock that has been infused with the metal scene. It's fine, but it's just, yeah, not for me. Yeah, sorry, Nathan, we were jumping right over you before you got your other one there.
I just had my last one was the new Comedy of Errors album, Threnody for a Dead Queen, which I really liked their last record. I think it was called Time Machine last year.
Yes.
And this is right in my wheelhouse of the type of prog I usually praise, but it was just kind of boring, and I couldn't get through it very well. Like, I thought there were some interesting things in the first couple tracks, but then afterwards it just kind of fell off a cliff, and I just didn't really get into it so much. So I was disappointed because I heard some people really liked that one and thought it was one of their best, but it just wasn't connecting with me for some reason.
I'm in the exact same boat. Those first two tracks are so good. Like, both are over 14 minutes long, and I'm like, this should be just the album, because the rest of the tracks are just left to wither and die. Like they hit so strong with those first two that I'm like, all right, let's go, let's see what else we have, and the rest are like B-sides, not completely formed ideas. It almost feels like a scraps record. Like it feels like, oh, these are just ideas that we had that we didn't quite know what to do with. We haven't turned them into anything, but here they are now.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because those first two tracks are so good, and I think that's the biggest disappointment of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Brent, I think you're the only one that hasn't had any other ones. No worries if you haven't.
Not really, but I might say the Metallica album was a little bit disappointing, but that might be just due because when I was introduced to them, I was back in Ride the Lightning because I'm a little bit old. And Puppets and Justice, those three albums will always be a part of my DNA musically. And the rest of their stuff is all right. I don't mind listening to it, but I don't get too excited about it.
That's fair. Yeah. And as I was mentioning before we jumped on the call, this summer for me has been like a 4-part harmonies of Metallica, the Bluey soundtrack, the new album that I can't talk about quite yet, but we'll get to in a bit. So it's a little bit of a whiplash between going from Metallica and the Bluey soundtrack. And while I've been doing that, I've been listening to 72 Seasons pretty heavily in my rotation, and I've been really enjoying it, but only because like it's novel, it's fun, but this is also the first time I'm really getting into some of those classic Metallica records, because I didn't grow up with Puppets or Justice or even Ride the Lightning. I grew up with the Black Album. That's what I grew up with. And then later on, Load and Reload. So like that was, to me, what Metallica was. And it isn't until this summer that I'm like, oh, this is what everybody's been praising about Metallica. I can finally, I get it now. Like I'm really getting into it. But yeah, 72 Seasons is fine. I enjoy it only because of the novelty of it. Within the rest of their discography, like I'm listening to that with Hardwired to Self-Destruct and Death Magnetic. Like these 3 records are kind of like in rotation.
Death Magnetic is pretty good.
I've been loving it. I've been really loving it.
3 of them, that's probably my favorite.
Yeah. So that's been a lot of fun, but I can see with the legacy of the band, and I think this is the common thing of the disappointments. It's like with these legacy bands, we're really hoping for that last big masterpiece. And each time we don't get it, it's like, well, they tried.
Yeah.
So let's move on to one of my favorite ones, which is the surprises. Those records that got us a little bit more excited than we thought it was going to when we first picked up the album. So I'm going to roll the dice and I'm going to exclude Nathan and Brent. So it's going to come down to me and Trav. Let's see here. That's going to be me. All right. I get to start off this whole thing. So yeah, the most surprising record for me, again, I have a couple runners up. And after listening to all 3, because I had 3 of them, this was the one that I came to based on my love for the band, but also kind of where they were with their last record. And actually, it was one of the disappointments that we were talking about. It's not Metallica, even though it's one of the surprises that I have on here. It is The Ocean with Holocene. Now, and I get it. Like, yeah, this is one of those records very similar to like the Mars Volta self-titled record from last year, like Death Heaven's record from 2 years ago, Infinite Granite, where they went a little bit more synth, they went a little bit more mellow, but they still maintained what it was that made the band so good in the beginning, like why people went to the band. And it just takes a little bit longer for the band, for the album to really get to that. But unlike, I think, like the Mars Volta record from last year, the ride to get there is just as enjoyable as the actual destination. This is the continuation of their big historical movements of songs and albums. I wasn't a big fan of the Phreazoic or Phonorazonic 2, the one that their last album that they put out. I probably butchered the actual title of that. But part 1 I loved, and that was my introduction to the band, and then I went back and I listened to all their other albums. yeah, there was something about this, the buildups on Holocene, the continuation of the ideas, like we're getting to the modern era, so less chaotic in terms of formation of the Earth and like where we are in the geological history, and more in the solidification of where we are currently. But what brought me back was the buildups and the payoffs. Love those big epic crescendos and the big payoffs that this album continuously builds towards. Yeah, I went to it with a mediocre excitement, and I was surprised, as this is one of their best albums, I would say. But that's
Yeah,
just for me.
I probably just need to let it stew a bit for me. Like, I need to give it a few more listens maybe before I get it. I just think the first time I listened to it, some of the mellow parts kind of bored me a bit, and then some of the heavy parts kind of bored me a bit too. I wish there was a little bit more excitement.
Yeah, my biggest disappointment of this year was that when I was doing a trip to Toronto, they were playing with Persephone, and I missed that double hitter. And I'm still kicking myself because that would have been just an
I'm
amazing
disappointed
show.
for you, son.
It was just so, I was like, no, because this album was like, I believe, just around the corner, so they were teasing some of the tracks on it. I just, yeah, and the Persephone album from last year was just so friggin' good. So yeah, the Oceans, Holocene, such a great, a pleasant surprise for me. Yeah, Brent and Nathan, did you guys give a listen to this?
I tried, but I can't wrap my head around it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
this is the most accessible record of theirs. But yeah, sorry, Nathan, I jumped on over you.
Yeah, I tried it out because this year I'm trying to like really expand my tastes and cover different things that a lot of you guys are talking about, and so I did check this one out. I'm not very familiar with their prior catalog. It's something I might have to remedy because I really love this one. I thought it was really cool, just a good vibe, just a great balance between those more atmospheric kind of laid back sections and then heavier sections. There's a little bit of the intensity, like intense moments and growling and stuff, but I felt like it was well balanced and worked for me, as even though I don't really typically get into it so much, but I thought it was a really strong release for sure.
Amazing. Let's continue the counterclockwise that I've got on here, and we'll start with Brent. A surprising record for you.
When I think back to the 70s, 3 albums, Pawn Hearts, God Bluff, and Still Life from Van der Graaf Generator are 3 of my favorite albums. And I was watching a review that Nathan actually did from a group called Seven and Pale. And I immediately grabbed it. I listened to it, heard a lot of Van der Graaf in it, ordered it, and just to this day, it's on a, how would you say it? Heavy rotation, and I think it's going to be up on my list at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Great album.
It was such a great album. And if you haven't checked out their first 2 records, they're also really good.
Yeah, I should check them out for sure.
Yeah, I'm so glad that there's other bands that, because we have a lot of bands that are emulating like Yes and Genesis and a little bit of like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but not a lot that are doing the whole King Crimson and Gentle Giant and Van der Graaf. So I love the fact that Seven and Pale is just like, we can do that.
Yeah.
So
first time I heard Hunter, I was like, holy Christ. Just I liked it right off the bat.
Yeah, it's some hard stuff too. Like, it's no surprise that a lot of bands aren't doing that, because it's hard music to get into.
Yeah, it's very complex and like
Yeah,
really intense. Yeah, really.
I never really thought of that. Like, that there's all these like Yes and Genesis clones out there, but not so many like Van der Graaf or like. I mean, if I think of like other 70s prog bands like Camel, I think the only band that really touches that is maybe Opeth.
Yeah. Well, they're a huge influence on them, right?
Gentle Giant's got Haken, I guess.
Yeah, parts of them. Yeah.
Some of it.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Trav, what was a surprise for you?
An album I found very surprising, and it's been mentioned a couple times in this video so far, is the new Yes album, Mirror to the Sky. What surprised me about it is after their last couple albums were pretty mediocre, not very good. I mean, I probably liked The Quest a little bit more than, the average fan did, but I could still understand why, like, weighting it against the average Yes album, it's probably at the bottom of the list for a lot of people. But I really felt like Mirror to the Sky was very strong. Like, it's very nice to hear Steve Howe rocking out again. And even though I think it's the title track, the one about like the dark sky preserve, some of the lyrics felt a little like ham-fisted into it. But it's a little corny, but I kind of appreciate that. Like, I like that Yes is kind of doing this, like, they're just having fun, and that's what I want to hear. I want to hear, like, it's not a masterpiece, but they're living their best lives and making an album that, like, you can put on and feel like these guys actually enjoyed the process.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's probably one of the better sort of later era Yes albums that I've heard. Probably I'd put it on like par with the better of the late 90s stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I was surprised because after the last couple of albums of theirs, I wasn't expecting much. And when I heard that they were coming out with a new album, I think I had a very similar reaction to what Notes might have had of "Please stop."
A little bit.
We don't
Yeah.
want another Yes album. And then, yeah, it turned out all right. So,
Mm-hmm.
big W for Yes on that one.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this one really surprised me. This was one of the runner-ups that I had. Because yeah, Heaven and Earth and The Quest were, in my mind, they were duds. The Quest was better than Heaven and Earth for sure, but I feel like this later day Yes is just like whimpering rather than roaring. But this one was the first one that we got like a pretty good sound from. Like, Cut from the Stars is still one of my favorite tracks of this year.
That was the name of that song.
Yeah, it's the first one that really felt like a Yes track since Fly From Here. And even Fly From Here didn't feel like a Yes track. Like, it felt like a band that worked with Yes to construct a lot of these tracks. But yeah, Cut From Your Stars and even Luminosity, the third track, was really good. Like, those two tracks are still in my heavy rotation of this year. So yeah, I would put this on par with like The Ladder and Fly From Here. Magnification still
too,
Magnification to me is still one of their absolute best records. Like, I would put that just as easily in the same kind of tier as the Yes album, Fragile and Relayered. But yeah, this one was good. I would say this is not just a fine album, it's a good album.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite as well.
Yeah.
I enjoyed The Quest too, quite
Yeah.
a bit. But Heaven and Earth, that was a bit of a turd.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, womp
Yeah.
womp.
I think my problem with The Quest is that the best song on it was literally ripped off of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Nathan, let's round out with your surprise.
All right. So yeah, I've kind of been saving this one. This is between this and No Spoon were probably my top two choices for the quarter. This one I considered a surprise just because it kind of came out of nowhere. It's a band that I hadn't heard of before and just really blew me away when I first listened to it. It's OK Goodnight and their album The Fox and the Bird. And I just really fell in love with it. I like the concept. I like the sound to it. They blend a lot of different things also in their sound, but they have this heavier progressive metal edge at times, but then they also have this almost Deer Hunter-esque aesthetic as well at times, and sometimes a folky kind of sound. They have a female lead singer who's just gorgeous vocals. There's even some like growling later, like in the second half of the album too, but it just follows this interesting storyline. There's these cool little instrumental interludes that come throughout that show their prog chops, and they have a bit of almost a Haken energy at times. And so it's just a really diverse, interesting, creative record that just came out of the blue that I just really fell in love with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked it. I liked it probably the most of all of those like modern prog records,
Yeah.
those that are channeling like the Deer Hunter or Coheed and Cambria or like that kind of style. Like Enoch Root
Yeah.
put out an album that it was okay,
Yeah.
but it leaned too hard on a Deer Hunter. But this
Yeah.
one felt very unique and very of its own thing. Like you can hear that style, but I can't say that I can hear particular tracks or particular motifs from anything that has come before. And I've been really liking it. And I like it mainly because of how heavy they go.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
something
It
that
gets
like
pretty intense towards the end.
yeah. I was gonna say this was like channeling that 4 part 1 from Coheed and Cambria, right? Like it's like that. Oh, we're getting some really heavy, good stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trav, Brent, did you guys give this one a listen? Give this one a spin?
Have not.
No.
I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So we will wind down and end our little roundtable to those records that we are looking forward to in the next quarter. So these are records that will be released in July, August, and September. And because Trav, I think you're the only one that hasn't gone first in this whole thing. So why don't we start with you? What are you most, or I guess I should start before I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Is there any other albums that have surprised us within this first quarter or second quarter?
The Anchor it all began with Loneliness.
Yeah.
That one just kind of came out of nowhere, and I admit I wasn't the most attentive when I listened to it the first time. I'd had a few adult beverages in my system, but I remember being particularly moved by the record, and I have to return to it now because it's it's weighing on me. I need to listen to it.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that has surprised me as well. That was the runner-up for me. And the thing that's most surprising of that record is that Andy Tillison is on keyboards from Tangent. I'm like, I know him from like the Canterbury Baroque kind of soundscape. What is he doing on a prog metal record? And he's flowing right into it. Like he's really embracing it. So yeah, if Dream Theater ever, gets tired of Jordan Rudess and his 1,000 note per second, Andy would fit right in with them. Absolutely. Been loving this record. Absolutely loving that record.
I love it too. Yeah, definitely was on my short list also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to give a little shout out to Ian from Rhyme Signatures, the Worm from HMLTD, I know he was really high on that one, and that really surprised me. It's really quirky and different. It's kind of more in that like Black MIDI, post rock kind of, post punk kind of sound, but it's really interesting. Concept record, almost like musical theater at points, but really interesting musicianship and just really worth a listen. Just to experience it, I think.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that was his most surprised album as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the ones that have surprised me, I think we've already talked about the Metallica one, 42, sorry, not 42, but 74 Seasons. We already talked about Anchor It. We already talked about Yes. One of the ones that kind of surprised me was the Swans record of The Beggar. And it surprised me in two different ways. It surprised me in how much I loved it and also how much I was frustrated by it. And I know I'm the outlier. I know I'm the only Swans fan on the call. And that's fair. Like I loved it because of how accessible it was. Like if you want to get a taste of what a Swans record is without being completely bombarded with this very experimental, very like avant-garde kind of rock music, this one's probably the easiest to get into. But it was also the most frustrating because I was so excited for The Beggar Lover, the big 43-minute track that takes up most of the second disc. And it just is feels there. Like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just kind of, so on the one hand, I was most surprised of how much I like this record, but I was also frustrated for how much I was not enjoying this record. So it's a lot. It's a beast. That's a surprise all in of itself. Yeah. Anybody else had a surprising record?
That's good.
Okay,
I'm good.
let's resume. Let's go back to those records that we are most excited for, and we will start with Trav. What's an album that you're most excited for July, August, and September?
Well, I'd already commiserated in the group chat about the first single from this one, but the new Tesseract, War of Being, is an album I'm looking forward to. It sounds like they're going to be going back to using a lot of the harsh vocal style again, which they haven't really done since their debut album. Like, I mean, they've done it a little sporadically on the last two records, like a growl here and there, but it sounds like they're really leaning into it on this new record, or at least the title track anyway. And, you know, props to them for dropping a 12-minute single for the first track, first single from the new album. That's a pretty bold move on their part. Hopefully, the rest of the album is better than what I heard on, on that single.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I always love hearing what Tesseract has to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I'm an outlier in that I'm really excited for the more harsher vocals, the more harsher presentation. This has whetted my appetite, and I cannot wait for whatever they have in store. Because yeah, this was, for me, I was just like, oh yes, more of this, please. But I also know I'm a little bit of an outlier in that case. Great, Nathan, what are you excited for?
As the resident expert of this, I think I need to mention Neil Morse. Neil Morse's upcoming The Dreamer Joseph Part 1 album coming out August 11th. Looks like it's more in that like Jesus Christ the Exorcist type style, where he brings in a bunch of guest singers, and it's more of that like musical opera kind of style with, you know, storyline throughout and a lot of different characters being portrayed and all that kind of stuff, talking about that Joseph story, like biblical story, Joseph in the coat of many colors story. So I wasn't as big on Jesus Christ the Exorcist compared to his other solo releases. Just I'm not as much into that like kind of musical theater type sound as, but it sounds like this one, from some of the early things I'm hearing, are it's a bit more of a prog record and a bit more like his more solo stuff, like Solo Gratia and stuff like that. So, but with a cast of different singers and stuff. So I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't a Neil Morse band record, because I think that's where he's really shining lately, but still always interested to check out anything Neil Morse related. So interested.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of this. On the one hand, I'm really excited because I loved Jesus Christ the Exorcist. I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar was one of my favorite albums growing up, and I felt the channel from that as well. I just love the story and how he interpreted it, and it was a little different than, you know, his Neil Morse band stuff, and it felt a little bit different and a little bit kooky. What I'm hesitant about is this is part one.
Right.
And it's already set to be like, I don't know if it's supposed to be a double album, but I'm like, oh man, just edit, just contain a little bit. Come on, my guy.
How many overtures does it have?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, oh my gosh, like
Overture of the overture.
You know,
you're a Neil Morse fan? Name 30 of his songs. Overture.
Okay, that's on me. I set the bar too low. Like, as much as I love Similitude of a Dream, and that is one of my favorite projects from him, because he continued it on with The Great Adventure, and it was a little bit lackluster. It felt like it's just spinning wheels. I really hope that this two-parter doesn't do that. And maybe because he's going into it as a two-parter, maybe it'll be a little bit more palatable. But what I'm most excited for about this whole project is, so we've had Jesus Christ Superstar, or Jesus Christ the Exorcist. We're getting Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I mean, the Dreamer Joseph I cannot wait for him to do a Phantom of the Opera or Cats or Starlight Express, because he's just following in the footsteps of Andrew Lloyd Webber. So that's what I'm most excited for, is like the next project. What's he going to do? I'm just being a clown here. Yeah, super excited for that. Oh, it's my turn. Okay, what am I most excited for? I've got a lot that I'm really excited for, but I'm going to stick to one, and it's one that can be listened to right now, and I think I'm most excited to talk about it, which is one that Nathan showed me, and that is I Am the Manic Whale and their album Bumper Book of Mystery Stories. This is I don't want to talk too much about what it is, and because I want to save that for our next quarter, but this is the kind of retro symphonic prog that I love. This is kind of in the same vein as like the Baroque Project or Southern Empire or Evership, that kind of symphonic prog that we only get maybe one or two releases of a year. And this is the type of album that I feel is one that's only put out maybe once every 5 years. So I'm really excited to talk about it in our next thing, but I'm super excited about that one.
Well, you guys are hyping it pretty good, so.
Unfortunately, currently it's not available on streaming sites, so you kind of have to listen to it off of Bandcamp, which is great because at least they have the whole album on there. There's been a couple of releases that only tease one or two tracks of the whole album and you have to buy it entirely. So you can listen to the whole album on Bandcamp, and if you're like me, immediately then buy the physical copy with the book. That's the one that I would recommend. Let's finish this off with Brent. Which one are you most excited for?
Mr. Wilson's new album.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Does that even have a potential release date yet, or
it's September?
I've heard September, late September.
I want to say it's September 23rd, but I could just be, that number might just be floating around my head for some other reason.
Right.
Yeah, the 29th is what I heard, but I don't know how firm that is. But yeah, that's what I'd read.
Maybe we'll be getting a single before too long too.
I know, right? Like he's already, and we were talking about this before we actually started recording. This is the first one that he hasn't put out a single quite far in advance. Like even with Porcupine Tree from last year, the album was released, I think, in May, but we had a single in January.
Harden was really early.
And even like I know it was under pretty extreme circumstances, but like Personal Shopper came out almost a year and a half before we got The Future Bites. So maybe I don't want to say he's learning from his past, but one of the reasons why I maybe not enjoyed those albums as much as I could have was because I had listened to half the album months before the actual album was dropped.
That's what drives me nuts about Peter Gabriel. When is that album coming out? Like I'm purposely not listening to any of those singles because I want to hear it in one piece of disc or whatever it's going to be on.
Yeah, I think because I'm seeing him in September. So I have a feeling I'll be listening to all of those new tracks for the first time in a live setting. I don't know if I want to break down and listen to them so I know what to expect, or if that's how I want to be presented to. But yeah, it's so you want to hype up the album, but you also don't want to show your entire hand. So it's a really fun balancing act between those two aspects. The other thing is, can Steven Wilson please do that whole renting out a theater and playing the album in darkness over in North America? Because he's already done it twice, I think, in the UK. So, even if you do it in like New York and LA and Toronto, I think I'd be happy with that. I think we'd all be okay with that. So before we sign off and before we give everybody where we can find everybody, is there any other albums that we are excited for the next quarter?
The new Baroness. Stone.
Yes, Stone.
Yeah, I've heard a couple, one single at least from it, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
I think what I like about it is that the production errors of the last couple records, they've turned that around on the most recent singles. So
Yeah, it
I'm
doesn't sound
expecting a
like it's
record that I can actually like listen to loud and not get like not come away with my ears bleeding.
I was gonna say it sounds like it's not mixed through mud, which I'm so excited for because yeah, purple and gold and gray. It's like, did you just close your eyes on the mixing board? Like, what were you doing? It's
Which is a
just
shame because the music on those records is so great.
so good, and that's really what was bringing my enjoyment of Golden Gray back, like so far down. Is like this sounds like it was literally mixed. Like I get sludge metal is supposed to sound sludgy, but I don't want to eat sludge in order to listen to this friggin' album.
I have Golden Gray on cassette, and when I first listened to it in my Walkman, I actually thought like I'd gotten a faulty cassette. And then so I go to listen to it on Spotify later, and no,
Yeah, the
no,
same thing
that's just how
happened.
the album sounds.
The same thing happened with I bought the 180-gram vinyl, and I thought the same thing. I'm like, this must have been pressed wrong. Like maybe they didn't push hard enough on the wax or something. But went to Spotify. I'm like, no, this is how it's supposed to sound. Oh, so yeah, I'm really excited because yeah, that first single is like, oh, they actually know what they're doing behind the mixing board. This is great. Any other records that we're excited for?
Yeah, I'm really excited of the Southern Empire. Their new album,
Yes.
Another World, is coming out on September 4th. So
Mhm.
they have a new singer, and I'm really excited. They've been kind of teasing this album for a long time. I thought it was supposed to come out last year, but I guess they pushed it to
Yeah.
this year. But I've heard a track from it, and it sounds awesome, just like what you'd expect from them. So I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, I've been listening to their last album of Civilization, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Pretty heavily within the past couple of weeks just because of how much that album is so freaking good. So yeah, really excited for that one.
Yeah. And the new Flower Kings.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Came out of
Look at
nowhere.
You Now. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of the first song that they released?
I'm
I thought
keeping
it
my
was
ears
really
closed.
good.
I don't
Heard it
want
yet.
to.
Yeah.
Gonna have to check it out now.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun. Really good.
And that new album that Eric Gillette's involved with, and
Oh, yeah.
Temic.
Temic. Yeah.
Could be interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of these seem like they're coming out in September. So like September is going to be pretty stacked.
I think Temic is coming out like later on. Like
November.
it's definitely a Q4 release.
Oh, is it?
November. Yeah, November.
Oh. Yeah, because that sounds really
December
cool
for some reason.
Yeah. One that came out this past weekend was Dream the Electric Sleep. Their American Mystic. Their
Really
last
good.
two records were pretty good. I still love Beneath the Dark Wide Sky. They have some really good tracks off of that one. Their last one of Giants New Ground was fine. But I haven't had a chance to listen to it this weekend, but that's one that I'm going to be turning to.
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to an album that's already out, but I haven't heard it in full yet, and that's the new Voyager, Fearless in Love. I think I'm going to put that on after we're done here.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Their mix of like synth pop and gent has really gelled on the last few singles I've heard from them, so I'm excited to hear this.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. They were the ones that were submitted to Eurovision?
Yes, they were. The song Dreamer, and I think it was in the top 10 of like the final tracks. Like it might have been second place. We almost had a prog metal band win Eurovision, so eat your hearts out, ABBA.
Yeah, we've opened up the door. We've put our foot in the door. Now we can finally break through.
It's prog metal's world now.
Oh boy. On that note, that brings our little episode to a close. let's go around one more time where people can find you. And let's start with Brent. Let's start with you again.
Oh, you can find me at Similitude of Prog, and trying to get more active in the channel. It's just a problem finding time sometimes, but I do a lot of watching, and I watch a majority of your guys' video. It was a great video you did yesterday, Travis. I quite enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
thank you.
That's about it.
Fun. And speaking of Trav, where can they find you?
Behind the curtain somewhere. I am on YouTube as Lausho's Reviews and Vlogs. I am on Twitter as Lausho, and I have, as I mentioned, my own progressive instrumental metal project called Borealia. You can find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp, all of the normal streaming services. And you can go to ultimateguitar.com and read some of my old reviews that I've done up to late last year.
Amazing. Great. Nathan, where can people find you?
All right. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel, Nathan on Shuffle. That's where I reside. I'm also Nathan on Shuffle on social media, Twitter, Instagram, all those. Yeah, just continue doing weekly content. I usually do about 3 or 4 shows a week and just covering all classic and newer prog. So
amazing. And you can find me here, this channel that you're currently watching. I will promote my other projects just because I'm really bad at promoting them. So I've got my 3 podcasts, Quid Prog Quo, which I introduce my friends and loved ones to prog music. They get me to listen to whatever we want. I put out it's only updating once a month just for scheduling and whatnot. But the last episode was my friend Alicia got me to listen to Beyonce, and I got her to listen to Kate Bush. So that was a really fun episode. Grace Hayhurst and I do a meditative podcast on metal music. So if you want more metal in your life and you want some good vibes, check us out there. And my newest podcast is The IP Address, which doesn't have anything to do with music. It's a library podcast where we look at copyright, we look at intellectual property and intellectual freedoms. We just put out a double episode about banned books. So yeah, I've been busy. I've been keeping busy. And then all the stuff you see here. And I think that's where we're going to round us out. That's where we're going to end. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Hopefully you got some albums out of this little bunch and are excited for the albums to come. And yeah. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, the panel has been great. We've been great. But you, the watcher, is also great. And until next time, Notes, Trav, Nathan, and Brent, we are out.